Emily Carter barely caught the crystal vase before it smashed onto the marble floor. "Careful!" Margaret Ashford snapped, rising from her chair. "That vase is older than you. One mistake and you'll spend the rest of your life paying for it." Emily's hands trembled as she set it back on the table. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Sorry doesn't replace priceless antiques." A deep voice cut in from the staircase. "Mother," she caught it. It didn't even break. Ethan Ashford descended the stairs, buttoning his sleeves. His calm tone only irritated Margaret further. "You don't need to defend the staff." "I'm defending fairness." Margaret shot Emily a warning glance. "Get back to work." It was only her third day in the Ashford mansion. 3 days of walking on eggshells. 3 days of pretending she didn't hear Olivia Sinclair whisper, "Gold digger," every time she passed. 3 days of reminding herself why she had accepted this job. Her father's surgery was in 18 days. If she lost this position, she lost any chance of saving him. That afternoon, loud voices spilled from the dining room. "I said I'm not marrying her just because it's good for business." "You don't have a choice," Margaret replied. "The Sinclair merger depends on it. I won't spend my life in a marriage I don't want." Emily lowered her head, grabbed her supplies, and slipped out. She almost collided with Ethan in the hallway. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "You didn't hear anything." A faint, genuine smile crossed his face. The first real smile anyone in the mansion had given her. "I believe you." That evening, Richard Ashford returned home. Unlike Margaret, he greeted every employee by name. Even Margaret softened in his presence. He stopped in front of Emily. "You must be the new housekeeper." "Emily Carter, sir. I've heard you've been working hard." Before she could reply, Olivia wrapped her arm around Ethan. "Richard, don't encourage the staff. They'll start thinking they're family." Emily excused herself at once. Richard frowned. There was no need for that. The next morning, Margaret inspected breakfast like a battlefield. "This toast is overdone." It was barely browned. Emily simply replaced it without a word. Across the room, Ethan watched silently. He noticed what everyone else ignored. Emily never argued, never rolled her eyes, never complained. She corrected the mistake and moved on, as if her dignity was the only thing she still fully owned. Around noon, she stepped outside to take a call. Her father's weak voice came through the oxygen machine. "The doctor asked whether we've managed to raise the rest of the money." Emily forced a smile he couldn't see. "I'm working on it. I'll have everything ready. You always make impossible promises, and I always keep them." She wiped her tears before returning inside. She couldn't afford to break down. Not here. Not when so much still depended on her staying invisible. That afternoon, Richard suddenly grabbed the edge of the dining table. His breathing turned uneven. The glass slipped from his hand and shattered. He collapsed. Margaret screamed. Olivia panicked. The servants froze. Emily ran. She dropped to her knees, checked his pulse, and began the emergency procedure she had learned while caring for her own father. "Don't touch my husband," Margaret ordered. "There isn't time." When the paramedics arrived, one examined Richard and looked at Emily. "Who stabilized him?" "I did." "You probably saved his life." Silence filled the room. Margaret looked stunned. Ethan couldn't take his eyes off Emily. 4 days later, Richard returned home. He stopped in front of Emily, extended his hand, and said quietly, "You did what no one else could." Margaret's expression hardened. Olivia noticed Ethan smiling at Emily, and for the first time, she felt something close to fear. The following week, Richard called Emily into his study. "I need these charity foundation records organized. My eyesight isn't what it used to be." Ethan entered, carrying a laptop. "I'll help." Richard smiled. "Excellent. The two of you can work together." Margaret passed the open door and stopped. Inside, Ethan patiently explained the filing system. Emily laughed softly after placing a folder in the wrong pile. A small, natural laugh that somehow filled the quiet room. Margaret had never seen her son look so relaxed with Olivia. She walked away, then entered Olivia's room without knocking. "The maid has become a problem." Olivia set down her magazine. "A problem?" Richard trusts her, Ethan respects her, and respect becomes affection. Make sure she leaves this house before Ethan realizes he's in love with her. Over the next 2 weeks, Emily became indispensable. Richard refused to let anyone else handle his foundation work. Whenever he needed company during recovery, she read the newspaper aloud. She never overstepped. She never asked for favors. She never mentioned her sick father. One afternoon, the chef dropped an expensive serving tray. Before Margaret could explode, Emily stepped forward. "It wasn't his fault, ma'am. The floor was wet. I forgot to dry it." It was a lie. She hadn't been near the kitchen. Margaret sighed. "Your salary will cover the damage." Later, the chef found her alone washing dishes. "Why did you do that?" Emily gave a faint smile. "You have 3 children." From the hallway, Ethan had heard everything. That evening, he quietly left an envelope on her table in the servants' quarters, the exact amount deducted from her pay. No note. The next morning, she returned it. "I can't accept this. You shouldn't have paid for something you didn't do. And I shouldn't accept money I didn't earn." Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You're the most stubborn person I've ever met." A small smile escaped her. "So I've been told." Neither noticed Olivia standing outside the door, nails digging into her palm. That evening, Ethan found Emily in the library carefully arranging the last of the foundation files. "You're still working?" he asked. "I wanted to finish before tomorrow," she replied without looking up. He walked closer. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone here." Emily finally met his eyes. "I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just trying not to lose this job." Something in her voice made him pause. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the rain against the windows. Ethan reached out, almost without thinking, and gently brushed a strand of hair away from her face. Emily froze. The air between them changed. Before either of them could step back, he leaned in and kissed her. It was soft, brief, and completely unintended. The second he realized what he had done, Ethan pulled away, eyes wide with regret. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "That shouldn't have happened. I had no right." Emily stood still, heart racing, unable to form a reply. "I'll leave you," he said quietly, and walked out of the room before she could say anything. Later that same night, Olivia confronted him. "Are you in love with the maid?" "I've done nothing inappropriate. You smile when you talk to her. You never smile at me anymore." Ethan closed his laptop. "Maybe because every conversation we have turns into an argument. I've finally started seeing people for who they really are." Those words stayed with Olivia long after he walked away. Meanwhile, Emily received another call from the hospital. Her father's condition had worsened. The surgery had been moved forward, 5 days from now. She only had enough savings for half the bill. She didn't notice Richard standing on the balcony above, watching her wipe her eyes. That evening, he called her into his study, handed her a cup of tea, and waited until she told him everything. Her father's illness, the mounting bills, the reason she had taken the job in the first place. He opened a drawer and placed a sealed envelope on the desk. "Consider this an advance on your salary." "I can't. It isn't charity, it's an investment in someone with integrity." Emily accepted it with trembling hands. For the first time in weeks, she felt a fragile thread of hope. Neither of them realized Margaret had been listening outside the door. 3 nights later, Emily couldn't sleep. She went down to the kitchen for water and found Ethan already there, sitting at the counter with a glass of his own. He looked up, surprised. "Couldn't sleep either?" She nodded. For a while, they just sat in the quiet kitchen. Then Ethan spoke, voice low. "About the other night. I meant what I said. I shouldn't have kissed you." Emily stared at her glass. "I didn't stop you." He looked at her for a long moment. "That doesn't make it right. You're working in this house. The power imbalance alone." "I'm not a child, Ethan," she said softly. "And I'm not afraid of you." The honesty in her voice broke something open between them. This time when he kissed her, it was different. Slower. Deeper. Both of them choosing it. They didn't speak much after that. There was no grand confession, no promises about the future. Just 2 people who had been lonely in different ways, finally letting themselves feel something real. When Emily eventually returned to her room before dawn, she knew something irreversible had changed. She had fallen for him, and she was almost certain he had fallen for her too. The following afternoon, Margaret and Olivia smiled at Emily in the family lounge. The smiles made her uneasy. "Richard needs Ethan to sign these before tomorrow's board meeting. He's in his private study upstairs. Emily took the folders and left. The moment she was gone, Margaret looked at Olivia. It's time. Ethan was reviewing reports when Emily knocked. She placed the documents on his desk. He asked her to help sort a few donation requests. They worked side by side, the quiet between them comfortable. They laughed once when both reached for the same folder. Neither noticed Olivia slip into the adjoining hallway, turn the key, and lock the door from the outside. Minutes later, Margaret's voice rang through the mansion. "Richard! Ethan!" Servants gathered quickly. Olivia pointed dramatically toward the study. "I've been knocking for several minutes. The door is locked." Mr. Brooks unlocked it under orders. Emily stood beside the desk holding a folder. Ethan looked up in surprise. Margaret's eyes locked on Emily. "So this is what you've been doing behind our backs. I don't understand." "The door was locked," Olivia said coldly. "It wasn't locked when she came in," Ethan replied. Margaret's voice turned sharp. "I warned you the day you arrived. You came here looking for my son." "That's not true. Women like her know exactly how to earn a wealthy man's sympathy." Richard finally spoke, sounding exhausted. "This argument ends now." Margaret turned to Emily. "Pack your things. You're dismissed." Ethan stepped forward. "You can't fire her over assumptions." Richard closed his eyes. "Emily, I think it's best if you leave." Those words hurt more than the accusations. Late that night, Emily folded her few clothes into the same suitcase she had arrived with. A soft knock came at the door. Margaret stood outside alone. She placed a white envelope on the table. "This is not another advance," she said calmly. "This is a settlement." Emily looked at the envelope but didn't touch it. "There's enough money here for you to start over somewhere far away. In return, you will leave tonight. You will never contact my son again. You will never answer if he tries to find you." Emily's voice was quiet. "And if I refuse?" Margaret's expression didn't change. "Then tomorrow morning I will make sure every medical arrangement Richard has already put in place for your father is cancelled. The hospital will be informed that the family is withdrawing all financial support." Emily's face went pale. "You would do that to a dying man?" "I would do whatever is necessary to protect this family," Margaret replied, "including my son." She pushed the envelope closer. "Take it, or watch your father lose the only chance he has left." Emily stared at the envelope for a long moment. Her hands were shaking. In that moment, she understood she had no real choice, not if she wanted her father to live. She took it. Before sunrise, she left the Ashford estate. She paused only once at the gate, looked back at the mansion without anger or hope, only a quiet sadness, and disappeared into the morning fog. Hours later, Ethan found the servants' quarters empty. Only her neatly folded uniform remained on the bed. Olivia watched from the hallway with a small smile. "Looks like she finally realized she didn't belong here." The slap echoed through the corridor. Ethan lowered his hand immediately, shocked at himself. "I should never have done that. But don't you ever speak about her like that again." Margaret watched from the staircase and realized, too late, that removing Emily had only made her son's feelings stronger. 3 months later, the mansion felt colder. Ethan refused every attempt to revive the engagement. Richard finally asked the question that had been hanging between them. "You're looking for her, aren't you? Every day, and finding nothing." Across town, Emily unlocked the doors of Carter's Bakery before sunrise. She was 7 months pregnant and still working longer hours than anyone else. Business had grown beyond anything she imagined. Customers came not just for the bread, but because she remembered every name and every favorite order. One rainy afternoon, Ethan stopped at a cafe. A newspaper on the next table froze him in place. Local bakery owner donates hundreds of loaves to homeless shelters. There was a photograph. Emily, holding a baby. He left without finishing his coffee. Emily was placing fresh bread on the shelves when the bell above the door rang. She looked up, and the world seemed to stop. Ethan stood at the entrance. Sophie quietly ushered the remaining customers out and locked the door behind them. "How did you find me?" Emily asked, her voice barely steady. "I never stopped looking. You should have. I know my mother threatened you. I know she used your father's surgery against you. I'm sorry." Emily let out a soft, tired laugh. Not because it was funny, but because the wound still hadn't fully closed. "You think an apology fixes what happened? No, it doesn't." She walked behind the counter, picked up a small framed receipt and handed it to him. Proof she had repaid every cent of Richard's money the moment her father recovered. Before he could speak, a tiny voice came from the back room. "Mama!" A 6-month-old girl toddled unsteadily into view, dark eyes identical to Ethan's. Emily picked her up. Grace rested against her shoulder, completely unaware of the silence that had fallen over the bakery. Ethan stared at the child, then at Emily. His voice barely rose above a whisper. "Is she—" Emily met his eyes with quiet honesty. "Yes." For a long moment, neither of them moved. "How old is she?" he finally asked. 6 months? You never told me. You never had the chance to know. I would have been there for every appointment, every sleepless night. "I know," Emily said softly. "After my father recovered, I thought about calling you. Then I asked myself one question. If the man I loved truly trusted me, why didn't he come after me before I disappeared?" Ethan lowered his head.
"I failed you."
"You believed what everyone else believed. You didn't ask why." In the weeks that followed, Ethan never pressured her. He simply showed up, buying bread, fixing shelves, carrying groceries for elderly customers, never once mentioning the past or asking for anything in return. Richard visited the bakery one quiet afternoon. Grace reached both hands toward him. He lifted her into his arms, eyes filling with tears. "I should have trusted the woman who saved my life." Emily smiled gently. "We all make mistakes." Margaret remained alone in the empty mansion for a long time. One day, she finally walked into the bakery. She looked at Grace, then at Emily, and spoke without any of her usual armor. "I almost robbed her of her father, and I robbed my son of 6 months with his daughter. I was wrong." Emily studied her for a long moment. "I can't erase what happened, but carrying anger forever would only hurt me. I accept your apology." Nearly a year later, a crowd gathered outside a brand new building. A ribbon stretched across the entrance. Carter's Bakery, second location. Richard stood beside the mayor. Sophie held Grace. Customers filled the sidewalk. Ethan waited quietly near the back, not at the front, not trying to stand beside Emily, simply waiting. Emily finished thanking everyone for believing in her. As the applause faded, Ethan stepped forward holding a small envelope. Inside was the employment application she had submitted the day she first walked into the Ashford mansion. Across the top, he had written one sentence. "If I had one chance to do this over, I would hire you into my life. Not as a maid, but as my equal." He dropped to one knee. "Emily, I can't change our past, but I will spend the rest of my life proving that our future can be better. Will you marry me?" Emily looked at Grace, then at the bakery she had built with her own hands, then at the man kneeling in front of her. For a long moment, she said nothing. The silence stretched, then she smiled, soft, steady, and completely free. "Yes." Grace clapped her tiny hands. Richard's eyes filled with tears. Emily glanced once more at the long road that had brought her here. She had entered the Ashford mansion as a maid with nothing but hope. She walked into her future as a successful businesswoman, a loving mother, and a woman whose dignity had never truly been taken from her. Because the greatest victory was never marrying into a wealthy family. It was proving she had never needed their wealth to become extraordinary. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and subscribe for more emotional stories like this one. Tell me in the comments, what was your favorite part? And would you like a part 2 following Emily and Ethan's life after the wedding? Thank you for watching until the end.